My name is Claire. I'm 43, divorced, and for the first time in my adult life, entirely untethered. When the final signature dried on the divorce papers 3 months ago, I expected something to change, some emotional clarity, maybe even relief. Instead, I felt nothing. Just the same hollow quiet echoing through the rooms of my too-large house in Vermont. I stopped reading. I stopped cooking. Even the stack of final essays on my nightstand, my students' last desperate attempts at literary brilliance, remained untouched. So when my sister's son, Caleb, called from Rome with that easy lilt in his voice and said, "Aunt Claire, what if you came here for a week?" I surprised us both by saying yes. He picked me up from the airport with a grin that hadn't changed since he was 12. The lean frame was new, the forearm tattoo a quiet rebellion I knew his mother still pretended not to notice, but the boyish charm was unmistakable. Caleb had grown into himself. And yet, when he hugged me, tight, sincere, I felt something more than family between us. Something unspoken, ancient almost, like a tether pulling me out of myself. "I booked us a car," he said, leading me toward the parking garage. "Convertible. Don't worry, it's not flashy. But you're not leaving Italy without your hair in the wind." I laughed, a real one. My first in weeks. "God, I forgot how dramatic you are." He glanced sideways at me with a smile that was all mischief and warmth. "No, Aunt Claire. You forgot how to live." We left Rome at dawn the next day, the city still sleepy and gold-washed. Caleb drove, one hand resting lightly on the wheel, the other drumming along to a playlist that was one part Italian jazz, one part early 2000s indie rock. "First stop's Florence," he said. "We'll spend the night there. Tomorrow maybe we hit Siena or Lucca, someplace quiet." I stared out the window, watching the countryside roll past in soft greens and ochre. "You really planned this whole thing?" "Kind of," he said, shrugging. "I knew you wouldn't come unless you had an excuse. So I made one." He didn't say it with judgment, just calm certainty, like he knew me better than I knew myself. In Florence, we checked into a small guest house tucked between a bakery and an old chapel. The room was modest, stone floors, iron bed frames, and a tiny balcony that overlooked an alley strung with drying linens. That night, we wandered the streets on foot. The air smelled like bread and wine and late summer. I was wearing a cotton dress I hadn't touched in years, and sandals that reminded me I wasn't made for cobblestones. Caleb walked close, pointing out little architectural quirks, telling stories he half remembered from tours and local friends. We ended up at a rooftop wine bar with a view of the Duomo, the dome glowing warm in the twilight. "Tell me something honest," he said, handing me a glass of Chianti. I blinked. "About what?" "About yourself. Something you haven't said out loud in a while." I hesitated. "I'm tired." Caleb nodded like he understood. "Not just physically." "No. More like, I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." I looked away, embarrassed by the truth of it. He didn't speak right away. When I looked back, his eyes were on me, not in judgment, but in recognition. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said softly. That line sat between us for a long while. The sky deepened to indigo. People laughed at nearby tables. A waiter brought more bread. But the space between Caleb and me felt quieter. Charged. And when he reached for my hand across the table, just lightly, just for a second, I didn't pull away. We left Florence the next morning under soft gray skies, the kind that made everything feel slower, softer. Caleb handed me an espresso in a paper cup and a pastry I didn't ask for, and I took both without argument. "Next stop isn't Amalfi just yet," he said, sliding into the driver's seat. "There's a little town I want you to see. You trust me?" "Not even a little," I said, smirking as I sipped. "But I'm in no rush." He grinned like he'd won something. 2 hours later, we pulled into Orbitello, a quiet, dreamy town nestled between the sea and a salt lagoon. The air smelled like warm stone and wild herbs, and the sea breeze tangled my hair as we walked along the narrow, sunlit promenade. "This place is kind of a secret," Caleb said. Locals don't really want people to know about it. It's where I come when I need to think. We found a quiet stretch of beach at the far edge of town, where the sand was coarse and golden. He threw down his bag and kicked off his shoes, stripping down to swim trunks before I even realized what he was doing. "You're not seriously swimming," I said. "I am," he called over his shoulder. "Come on, Aunt Claire. Live a little." I stared at him, barefoot, wet curls already forming at his temples, walking backward toward the surf like a boy half his age, and something in me cracked. I slipped off my shoes, rolled up the hem of my dress, and followed. The water was cold at first, bracing, but it felt like it was washing something off me. We waded in together, up to our waists, then our shoulders. The sky stretched out in soft blue above us, and when I turned to look at Caleb, he was already watching me. "You seem lighter today," he said. "I feel not like myself. But maybe that's a good thing." He didn't answer right away. We stood there, half submerged, the tide gently rocking us. Then, almost cautiously, he said, "Do you ever think maybe you've been someone else's version of you for so long, you forgot who you really are?" I stared at him. "Yes," I whispered. "Exactly that." He moved closer, not touching, just closing the space between us, and his voice was low, raw. "You know what I remember most about you when I was little?" he said. "What?" "You used to laugh like you weren't afraid of anyone hearing. Big, open, honest. It's weird, but I used to think, if I could make you laugh like that, I was doing something right." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. And then when I got older, he went on, "I realized how rare that kind of laughter is. How rare you are." The way he looked at me then, eyes unwavering, open, it wasn't playful. It wasn't even flirtatious. It was something deeper. Something hungry for understanding. "You don't have to keep pretending around me," he said again, like it was a vow. Not the fine smile. Not the strong act. I've seen through it for years. The breeze stirred the water. I felt it everywhere, on my skin, in my chest. "Why didn't you ever say anything before?" I asked. He gave a quiet smile, his voice a whisper now. "I thought you needed to hold it together. And I didn't want to be the reason you let go." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, salt lost in salt. Caleb reached up, brushing it away gently with the back of his hand, fingers grazing my skin just enough to make me feel it in my knees. "I'm not afraid of who you are, Claire," he said, deliberately leaving off the word "aunt. "And I don't think you should be either." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, held in the weight of everything he wasn't supposed to say, and everything I wasn't supposed to feel. That night, we sat on the tiny terrace of our guest house. He brought out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "To not pretending," he said. And I drank. The rain started as a mist while we drove the winding coastal road, but by the time we reached Amalfi, it had become a steady downpour. The sea below churned dark and restless, the cliffs above veiled in sheets of gray. Our hotel, a weathered old villa perched high above the water, looked like something out of a dream. Stone arches, ivy curling along the walls, windows glowing warm against the storm. We ran inside laughing, wet hair plastered to our faces. "This is insane," I said, wiping at my eyes. "You're insane for planning this." Caleb grinned, pushing his curls back. "Best memories are always made in bad weather." Our room was at the end of a narrow corridor, the windows opening out to the sea. A small fireplace flickered in the corner, and the air smelled faintly of lemon and salt. It felt private, almost too private. I went to the window, watching the rain stripe the glass. "Looks like we're stuck here tonight," I said. "Not the worst place to be stuck," Caleb replied quietly. We spent the first hour unpacking, changing into dry clothes, and sitting by the fire with mugs of tea. The storm deepened outside, the wind rattling the shutters. Every now and then the thunder rolled, so low it felt like the whole building exhaled. "You're tense," Caleb said suddenly. I blinked at him. "What?" "Your shoulders." He set his mug down. "You're holding everything up there like you're still at work." I gave a small, tired laugh. "Well, that's my trademark, isn't it? Carrying everything." He studied me for a long moment. You don't have to tonight. I frowned. What do you mean? I took a massage therapy course once, he said lightly. Back when I was broke and looking for odd jobs in college. I'm actually decent at it. He paused, then added, softer. I could help. Just help you relax. The words sat between us, heavier than they should have been. That's not necessary, I said quickly, but my voice lacked conviction. I know it's not. His tone was calm, measured. But you look like you haven't let anyone take care of you in a long time. Something in me flinched at the truth of it. He must have seen it, because he stayed very still, his hands open in his lap. Only if you want, he said. Nothing weird. I promise. For a moment, the only sound was the fire snapping softly. Then I exhaled. Okay. Caleb stood up slowly and moved behind me. I sat forward on the edge of the chair, my back to him. His hands hovered just above my shoulders for a second, as if asking for permission, before they finally rested there, warm, steady, deliberate. You're so tense, he murmured, almost to himself. I told you, I said, trying for humor. Trademark. He didn't laugh. Instead, his thumbs pressed gently at the base of my neck, drawing small, slow circles. It wasn't a stranger's touch. It wasn't a professional's touch either. It was something else, careful, knowing, almost reverent. The tension in my muscles began to melt, but the tension under my skin only deepened. You're good at this, I whispered. Told you, he said softly. His breath brushed the back of my hair as he spoke. Just breathe. I closed my eyes. The storm outside roared louder, the sound of the sea crashing against the cliffs. His hands moved lower, kneading along my shoulders, down my arms, the heel of his palm pressing just enough to coax a sigh from me. Feels like you've been holding everything in, he said after a while. All the hurt, all the disappointment. You don't have to anymore. I swallowed hard. And who's supposed to catch me if I let go? There was a pause. Then his voice, quiet but firm. I will. My breath caught. He kept working the muscles of my back, but slower now, like the massage had become an unspoken conversation. His fingers traced the edges of my shoulder blades, down to where my dress ended. It wasn't inappropriate, nothing about it was, but the closeness was undeniable. My pulse felt louder than the storm. You deserve more than pretending you're fine, he said, his tone low, almost a whisper. You've been everything for everyone for so long. Let someone be something for you. I turned my head slightly, catching his reflection in the darkened window. A young man, jaw tense, eyes lowered. Not my nephew, not in that moment. Just Caleb. Just a man trying to reach me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Lie back, Caleb murmured, his voice quiet enough that it almost blended with the rain against the windows. I hesitated, caught between instinct and trust, then eased down on the rug near the fire. The flames threw flickering shadows across the ceiling, painting us both in gold and amber. My heart thudded hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Caleb knelt beside me. Just your head first, he said softly, as if explaining to himself as much as to me. Helps release the tension before anything else. His palms cupped the sides of my head, fingertips slipping into my hair just enough to anchor me. He began slow, steady circles at my temples, the kind you'd feel in a spa but with something deeper behind it. Each movement coaxed a breath out of me, and with each exhale, the sound of the storm faded. Breathe with me, he said quietly. I did.
In, out.
His hands moved with the rhythm, his thumbs brushing along my jaw, down to the base of my neck, not hurried, not greedy, just deliberate. Your body's been in survival mode for too long, he said after a moment. I can feel it. You're not supposed to say things like that, I whispered, eyes still closed. I know. His thumbs pressed lightly under the curve of my skull, making something in my chest loosen. But it's true. My breathing grew deeper, slower. His did too. Without meaning to, we fell into the same pace, inhale, exhale like the sea rising and falling below the cliff. The sound of our breaths was louder than the crackle of the fire now. Caleb's hands left my temples and began a slow path down the sides of my neck, over my shoulders, working away at knots I hadn't even known were there. He spoke less and less, until there were no words at all. Only touch. Only breath. I opened my eyes briefly and found him watching my face, his expression unreadable but intent. Not a smirk. Not a grin. Just focus, like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Caleb," I began. "Sure," he said softly. "Just breathe." His palms flattened lightly over my collarbones for a moment, not crossing any line, just resting there, and the weight of them felt like a kind of permission I hadn't given anyone in years. The thunder rolled outside. The fire hissed and cracked. Our breathing rose and fell together, steady, rhythmic, until the room seemed to shrink around it. I couldn't tell anymore if he was calming me or if we were calming each other. Caleb's hands lingered at my shoulders for a moment longer, then drifted lower with slow, practiced movements, following the long lines of tension along my arms and sides. It wasn't rushed. Each touch was deliberate, like he was tracing away years of quiet ache rather than just muscles. He leaned closer, his breath warm at my ear. "You don't even know how beautiful you look when you let go," he murmured. A shiver moved through me that had nothing to do with the cool air of the room. His palms pressed and released, working lower, always in that steady rhythm. "You've been carrying so much," he whispered again. "And you're still so strong. So graceful." Each word fell softer than the last, like raindrops against my skin. I closed my eyes tighter, my breath catching. No one had spoken to me like that in years, not about the way I looked, not about the way I was. The combination of his hands and his voice was undoing something in me I didn't even know I'd locked away. "Breathe," he said, still low, almost reverent. "Just let yourself be, for once. You're safe." His hands moved a little further down my sides, never crude, never taking, just massaging, coaxing each knot loose while the storm outside grew louder. His mouth was so close to my ear now that when he whispered, I felt the sound more than I heard it. "You deserve to be seen," he said. "Not hidden, not forgotten. Seen." Our breaths had synced completely, slow, deep, rising together in the darkened room. The space between words, the space between touch, had become charged with a kind of electricity I hadn't felt in years. Caleb's hand slowed, then stilled, resting lightly at my sides. The storm outside was a low roar now, the fire in the hearth a soft glow. We stayed there like that for a heartbeat, breathing in unison, suspended in a silence that felt like the inside of a held breath. He bent closer, his lips near my ear. "You're extraordinary," he whispered. Something inside me cracked open. The years of quiet restraint, of living behind glass, seemed to splinter all at once. I turned my head slightly, I don't even remember deciding to, and found his face right there, only inches from mine. Our eyes met. He didn't move at first. He just looked at me, searching, as if asking a question without words. My pulse was loud in my ears. My breath came fast. And then, so slowly it felt like a dream, his forehead touched mine. "Claire," he murmured. I don't know which of us crossed the last inch. But suddenly his lips were against mine, soft, hesitant, a question rather than a claim. It wasn't the kiss of a stranger, or of someone taking, it was a tentative, trembling meeting, full of everything we hadn't said aloud. For a heartbeat, the world outside disappeared. No storm, no villa, no titles. Just the warmth of another person's breath, the salt of the sea on our skin, and the undeniable knowledge that something between us had shifted. When we finally pulled back, his hands still framed my face. He searched my eyes as if waiting for me to speak, to pull away, to tell him what this meant. I couldn't. I just kept breathing, my lips tingling where his had been, the fire throwing light across the room like a confession. The storm had passed some time in the night. I heard it as I drifted in and out of sleep, the wind softening, the rain tapering off into a whisper. What lingered wasn't the storm. It was what happened just before it ended. The kiss. I woke to golden light pouring through the shutters, the scent of lemon trees carried on the breeze, and the undeniable tightness in my chest, the ache of awareness. I wasn't alone. Caleb was sitting on the edge of the balcony just outside the open doors, barefoot, coffee mug balanced on one knee, looking out at the sea as if it might explain something. I stayed in bed a moment longer, watching him. The line of his shoulders, relaxed but unreadable. The way his hair curled slightly in the humid air. He looked like someone from a dream I hadn't meant to wake up from. Then he turned. He didn't say anything at first, just held my gaze through the space between us, as if words might ruin it. Or maybe, like me, he was afraid of what we'd have to admit. "Hey," he said finally, quiet and cautious. "Hey," I echoed, my voice hoarse with sleep and something else. He stood and came inside, setting his coffee down on the nightstand without asking if I wanted one. It felt intimate in a way that made my pulse tick faster. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Mostly." He sat at the foot of the bed, not touching me. That silence again, but now it was heavier. And I knew someone had to break it. "About last night," I began. "Yeah." He ran a hand through his hair. "We should talk." I looked at him. "Do you regret it?" His eyes lifted to mine. "No," he said it quickly, firmly. "But I don't want to make things worse for you either." I let out a breath. I didn't realize I was holding. "You didn't." His jaw clenched. "Claire, I know this is complicated. And if you need to tell me that it can't happen again, I'll respect that." I stared down at my hands, fingers tangled in the blanket. "I don't know what it was, Caleb, but it didn't feel wrong. And maybe that's what scares me." He nodded slowly. "You've spent so long doing what you're supposed to." "I get that." I met his eyes. "You're not supposed to understand." He gave a half smile, sad and sharp. "I think I've been trying to understand you for years." That quiet truth landed hard between us. I reached for the coffee he brought, needing something to hold on to. "Where does that leave us?" Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I don't know, but I know what I felt. And I'm not sorry." His voice cracked just a little at the end.
Honest.
"Vulnerable." "I'm not either," I said. We sat in that raw, open silence. No decisions. No answers. Just a moment neither of us could undo, and the strange, startling relief of not pretending anymore.